What once seemed impossible is just not.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for a loaded episode of Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the number one sports podcast network out there. Thank you all so much for helping make that the case. Names, if the defensive staff doesn't shake out the way I would like it to keep an eye on. Just for a reference point, perhaps, signing day, a couple of new Ducks in the fold. Will Chris Henry be one of them? Yes, we will get to all of that. This show brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. So, Chris Henry Jr. has long been someone that Oregon has tried to flip. He's the number one wide receiver in the class of 2026. He's been committed to Ohio State for quite some time. Now, originally, it was reported he committed to the Buckeyes on National Signing Day yesterday. And then he didn't. And the reason that he didn't, and why this has changed, because I have been asked many a times over the last several months, and I've talked about on the show, could Oregon flip him? Is there a reasonable chance? And I always came back to the same conclusion. Man, Ohio State and wide receivers, the track record is undeniable. And Brian Hartline, man, that guy's a good recruiter. I don't think you're going to pull him away when he's saying his recruitment is shut down when Brian Hartline is there. Anyone else notice the news that came out of Columbus and made its way down to the Eastern Sunshine State? Yeah, Brian Hartline will be the next head coach out South Florida. I do not believe that Chris Henry was expecting that. He did not sign with Ohio State, and there started to be some serious, legitimate buzz going around. If Oregon pulls this off, and they absolutely can, I don't think it's a guarantee, but literally 2 days ago, I would have told you no. This isn't even worth discussing on the show because I know he's going to sign with Ohio State. This is the one thing. This is the one scenario that would have made me go, well, then Oregon would have a shot. Well, here we are. That scenario has come to pass. Now, last time I checked, Ryan Day is still a very good head coach. And Oregon does not have a current offensive coordinator for 2026. But what they do have is a wide receivers coach. And that's the difference. And part of the reason I believe that Oregon's got a legitimate shot. Ross Douglas came over, and boy, what a splash he'd be making here if the Ducks somehow pull this off. Ross Douglas is not the offensive coordinator, nor do I believe he will be a candidate for offensive coordinator. I'll talk about that more in just a moment. But he's the wide receivers coach. Now, Brian Hartline was the offensive coordinator the offensive coordinator at Ohio State, but he is also the wide receivers coach. Like Will Stein at Oregon is the offensive coordinator and the quarterbacks coach. That designation typically comes or stems from where your background is. And with Will Stein, of course, it's working with quarterbacks. Some offensive coordinators are receiver guys, running back guys, offensive line guys, or quarterback guys, or tight end guys. And funny, I should bring that up. Anyway, this would be one of the biggest recruiting wins in the history of Oregon football. It would be up there with Kayvon Thibodeau and DeCorian Moore, and yes, Justin Flo, whose career obviously didn't work out. Chris Henry lining up alongside DeCorian Moore, who's made a couple of public overlays at him, like, hey, come on, man. Come on, get over here. Gotta have you. And I'm here for that. This would be one of the biggest recruiting victories in the history of Oregon football. To pull the number one receiver in back-to-back classes, unprecedented, especially for the Ducks. And this is just where the program has gotten to over the last couple of years under Dan Lanning's leadership and the staff members that he has had and how tirelessly they work. Now, the director of recruiting is reportedly going with Will Stein. So Dan Lanning will have to fill that particular role. Pat Biondo is his name. He's reportedly likely to be the next general manager for Kentucky football with future head coach Will Stein, which of course leaves a void. But the more pressing void is, well, who's Oregon's offensive coordinator going to be? So there was a report that went out from Matt Zenitz of CBS Sports, who's been all over this stuff in the last 48 to 72 hours as it's unfolded. Because remember how quickly the Will Stein thing came together, and then Tosh Lupoi was official within 24 hours after that. Oregon could hire, according to Zenitz, tight ends coach Drew Maringer, who has the most play calling experience by far of anybody on Oregon's staff. Now, there could be a lot of reasons that report comes out. Really two. Number one, because it's actually going to be a possibility, and I do believe it is a possibility. He's well liked on staff, little play calling experience. He's been on staff for many years, familiarity with a lot of the guys. That's one option. Perhaps, this is just a thought I had, perhaps that story got out there because Oregon wants to project stability at a time where Chris Henry is deciding, do I want to go here? Do I want to go there? Because I don't know what's happening at Ohio State. Just a thought, something to consider. And I think the Maringer consideration's real. I would not describe him as the clear-cut favorite to be Oregon's offensive coordinator in the same way I'd describe Chris Hampton to be the clear-cut favorite to be Oregon's defensive coordinator. And I've said before, not that I don't like Drew Maringer, because he's done a good job with the tight end room over the last couple of years. I mean, you look at what Kenyon Sadiq is doing, he might win the Mackey Award, which would be pretty awesome, but that's not a small thing. Terrence Ferguson, dude's crushing it. Jamari Johnson looks great, having the best season of his career. And I got a question about him later on today's show. I think Oregon's capable of aiming higher. I think the offensive coordinator position at Oregon, which has generated 2 consecutive Power 4 head coaches in Kenny Dillingham and Will Stein, I don't think you have to or are stuck with hiring the guy that's already in-house. I think you can go out and try to find the next Will Stein, a young, up-and-coming coordinator that's got a great track record as an established play caller. Because Maringer hasn't called plays that often in his career. He's had some co-OC jobs over his various stops. The only time he was the actual OC was in 2016 at Rutgers. That's the only time he's been the full-fledged offensive coordinator, sole go-to guy, and play caller there. So, and the offensive numbers weren't great, but it was also at Rutgers. So let's take that with a grain of salt. I'd like for Hampton to be the DC. I'd like for Oregon to see what's out there at the very least with the offensive coordinator move. And I don't know if a decision is going to come down to this or not. But I wouldn't make a decision. This is going to be a somewhat controversial statement among some Oregon fans. I would not make a decision about the offensive coordinator role just to get Chris Henry if it doesn't involve hiring the best guy for the offensive coordinator spot. I think the role is too important. Getting Henry would be incredible. It would be unlike anything we have seen before. The talent in Oregon's wide receiver room doesn't concern me. It's not a barren wasteland, especially if Evan Stewart were to come back, which is something else I'll talk about on today's show. So I would like to see Dan Lanning prioritize who's the best offensive coordinator. And look, if that doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, and it's just about the relationship between the guys that are in that room and building that bond with Chris Henry and getting him to flip to Oregon, great. That'd be my ideal scenario. Chris Henry comes to the Ducks. They hire an offensive coordinator who we watch on film and go, oh, yeah, this offense looks great, with possibly Dante Moore and DeCorian Moore and Chris Henry Jr. and Gatlin Bear, who signed, amongst others. It's just crazy. I didn't even mention Jeremiah McLaughlin, who made the greatest non-catch in the history of football. So let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments below. A lot going on. Just a lot going on right now. Hit me up on Twitter, all of that good stuff. We're going to go back to the defensive coordinator side of things. What if? Let's just be prepared. Like Boy Scouts, let's always be prepared for what if I don't get what I'm looking for. First, this episode brought to you by Aura Frames. The holidays are officially here, which means gift hunting season is on. And if you want something meaningful, personal, and guaranteed to get a reaction, Aura Frames is the gift that delivers every time. It's not just something you wrap. It's a way to share memories, because Aura isn't your average picture frame. You can preload the frame with photos before gifting it. So when they plug it in, the memories are already there. No apps to figure it out, no setup headaches, just instant smiles. And look, if you're getting a photo frame for somebody, there is a solid chance. Like, I don't think someone necessarily would, well, no, that's not true. Someone could get me an Aura frame and I'd put it up and it'd be great, reliving a bunch of different memories all the time. But if you're getting it for your parent or your grandparent or somebody like that, odds are you don't want to have them go through the setup. That's what Aura Frames is about, making it easy for you. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver mat frames, named #1 by Wirecutter, by using the promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's auraframes.com, promo code COLLEGE. This deal is exclusive to listeners, and frames sell out fast, so order yours now. Get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. Check out auraframes.com. Just a jam-packed show. Gotta have a second segment sip. Let's talk about some defensive candidates. If Chris Hampton doesn't wind up being the defensive coordinator. Now, I think that's the most likely option. That's what I would like to happen. But you know what? Crazier things have transpired here in college football. So, in this segment, a couple of you sent me some names to evaluate for the defensive coordinator role, if it's not Chris Hampton, of course. And I'm going to give two different SSA takes for each of these guys: desirability and feasibility. And there are four names here. And these are some good names. Some of you came up with some real legitimate names, and I went through and went, oh man, that's a good poll. That's college football knowledge right there. So let's start with D'Anton Lynn at USC. He has done a really good job with the Trojans on that side of the ball. And yes, Oregon just put up a lot of points and yards. That is far more personnel driven than scheme driven. The recruiting for USC, and unless Oregon gets Chris Henry, the Trojans will finish with the #1 overall recruiting class in the country. That has stepped up. The defensive performance has stepped up in a big way. USC, if they'd hired him a year earlier, they might already be a college football playoff team. Instead, of course, they're a good team, ranked inside the top 20. Oregon's best win of the season right now. So, D'Anton Lynn, desirability, I'd put that at about an 8. I've been high on him for years. I think defensively, he does a lot of things well. He has completely changed them on that side of the ball. There is still work to be done. But if he walked into Oregon, he would be coordinating with the best personnel he has had since the 2023 UCLA team that he was the defensive coordinator for with Chip Kelly. They had NFL dudes definitely up front. Pretty sure Latu was on that defensive line, who was incredible, and he's really good with the Colts now. But that UCLA team actually wasn't great on offense. That was Dante Moore's true freshman team, so brief reunion there. Desirability, 8. Feasibility, I think this is a 2. Because I don't believe that USC, unlike UCLA, who's not as serious about football as the Trojans are, is going to let him walk. There is no thought in the back of my mind, it wouldn't happen. He's not going to go from USC to Oregon. Nope, it's happened before in both directions, I believe. So I'm pretty sure Oregon had an assistant go down there a while back. I forget exactly who it was. But yeah, so he's an 8 on desirability, 2 on feasibility. Justin Wilcox, this is a 10 on feasibility. I'll start there. If Dan Lanning calls Justin Wilcox and says, would you like to be... Well, let me touch that down to 9.5. Still really high. If he calls Wilcox and says, do you want to be my defensive coordinator? I don't know how Justin Wilcox would say no. The only thought in the back of my mind was the whole, will he be Oregon's next head coach? He gets the offer. Was it a real offer? Was it just for show? I don't know. maybe that rubs him the wrong way. Maybe it doesn't. But he played for Oregon. And the reason he got hired to Cal is the last time he was a defensive coordinator was at Wisconsin in 2016. And their defense was really, really good. He was also at USC for a couple of years. He's been at Washington before. He's a West Coast guy. He's an Oregon guy. Now, my everydayers know I'm not a fan of hiring, quote unquote, the Oregon guy just to keep it all Oregon guys. Like, let's make someone like Dan Lanning into an Oregon guy and hire the best candidate for the job. So when you hire a former head coach, yeah, I think there's some serious upside there because of the experience. And generally that guy's been a head coach because he was successful as a coordinator. Like guy I mentioned earlier this week on the show, Ryan Walters up at Washington. Why is he doing well? Because he's always been a good defensive coordinator. He just wasn't the right head coach for Purdue. I don't know who the right head coach for Purdue is in the modern era. They haven't won a Big Ten game since 2023. Desirability for Wilcox, I'd put that at about a 4. Like, I don't think it'd be the worst outcome imaginable. He hasn't called defensive plays in a long time. He's been a head coach for a while. I'm sure he'd get right back into the swing of things, and it'd be perfectly fine. Of course, he's working under Dan Lanning. But did I ever feel like his defenses were out scheming guys? No, they had more talent than you'd think Cal would have had on that side of the ball, and their defensive numbers at times were kind of up and down. So 9.5 on feasibility with Wilcox, and a 4 on desirability. Now here's a good one. Pete Kwatowski. He's the defense coordinator at Texas. Desirability here, he's got familiarity with a big-time program. His results have been very good. The only reason Texas has the record that they do have, which is not going to get them in the college football playoff, nor should it, is that Arch figured things out in the second half, and their defense has been really good all season long. Not every single week, but as we've seen over the years, no defense can be perfect all the time, unless Ohio State. You're Ohio State, apparently, because, man, Matt Patricia doing a heck of a job. But, Texas has recruited very well over the last several years. It's Texas, kind of recruits itself. Guess what? It's Oregon, kind of recruits itself. So I think it would be a lateral move for him because Texas is one of the premier college football coaching jobs in the country. But, yeah, if you could pull Pete Kwatowski, I'd be super down. So I'm going to give that one also an 8 on desirability. But at Texas, I think it's a 1.5 on feasibility. I don't think they're going to let him walk unless he's going somewhere that's trying to make him a head coach. But, yeah, that'd be cool. Here's one. Blake Baker. Oof. Like I said, you guys sent in good names. Good names here. This is deep knowledge of ball. Blake Baker was a defensive coordinator at Missouri. He's currently the defense coordinator at LSU. They're trying to keep him there now that they've hired Lane Kiffin. And let me tell you, that'd be a heck of a coaching tandem. Lane Kiffin calling plays on one side of the ball and Blake Baker on the other side with what LSU can have talent-wise. And by the way, DJ Pickett, that Oregon almost had, 5-star DB, he's really good. He's been playing as a true freshman and tearing it up a little bit like Brandon Finney. Not quite, but yeah, he's pretty good. So Blake Baker, again, experience at a big-time program, desirability, I'd probably put this at a 10. Feasibility, this is probably sitting at a 1. And I put this below Kwatowski, who I put at 1.5 because LSU, like Texas and USC, not going to just let their coordinators walk to be coordinators at a competitor because they've got the finances to pay him what he's worth. The other thing is Matt Moscona of Locked On LSU reported that Blake Baker interviewed for the Tulane head coaching job. So this is also probably a pipe dream in there. And I think any of those guys could do well. Obviously, I'm the least bullish on Wilcox of that particular group. If it's not Chris Hampton, who's my number 1, I'd look at the San Diego State defense coordinator. I keep forgetting his name. It's Rob Aurick. Rob Aurick. I would look at him schematically. He's been nothing short of brilliant this year for San Diego State. And I look at Brian Ward, the defense coordinator at Arizona State, Ryan Walters at Washington. But those other guys, yeah, That'd be pretty good. But for Chris Hampton, feasibility should be a 10. If Dan Lanning offers him the defense coordinator job, that I don't know what job he would take to go elsewhere. But again, maybe he gets a head job somewhere somehow. Crazier things have happened. And desirability for Chris Hampton, yeah, I'm sitting at a 9. I think he's a stud. So Tyler sent in this question, flipping back to the offensive side for a moment. Which Oregon quarterback do you think Will Stein is bringing with him to Kentucky? I hope it isn't Achilles Smith Jr. I don't think you have to worry about that. If he does, I'd be stunned if it's not Austin Novosad. I saw a report that it's not going to be Bryson Beaver, their 4-star commit in the class of 2026. I don't think Luke Moga's far enough along as a passer to go and start at Kentucky right away. And that leaves you with Novosad, and then Achilles Smith Jr. is a legacy and is also probably not prepared to start. Novosad's got to be the most ready to start. So, frankly, for Novosad's sake, I'd love it if he got that opportunity. I'd be rooting for him. It'd be a fun thing to watch from afar. It'd be difficult for sure, but I'd love if he got that chance to start because he's waited and has put in the time to be a starting quarterback, and I think he has the talent to do it. And I don't think that Will Stein would take Brock Thomas with him either. So I think Novosad would probably be the guy that, and Brock Thomas is a local kid. I don't think he and Achilles Smith, because of their ties to the Ducks, I don't think they'd want to leave. So yeah, Novosad would be the most likely option. So Oregon had a really good national signing day. Really good national signing day. There's just that one thing we're still waiting on. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game. You're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. And we don't know yet, until the weekend unfolds, who Oregon's playoff opponent is going to be or where the game is going to be played. It could be not until January 1st at the Orange Bowl in Miami. It could be December 19th or 20th at Autzen Stadium, which is what I would like to see. Whoever Oregon plays against. You want to get an idea for maybe what to expect. You want to know what the line is? FanDuel's the place to do it. And they've got a bunch of stuff. They've got the line. They've got the money line. They've got the point total. They've got prop bets. FanDuel's got you covered. College football, NFL, FanDuel's got it all. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. So, good news for the Ducks on National Signing Day. 18 players signed their national letters of intent. They will officially be Ducks. A couple of guys that really stood out amidst all this coordinator turnover as names that I was keeping an eye on. Tank Jones was up there. Really any defensive lineman, because Tosh Lupoy is going down to Cal, but Tank Jones signed. And the other one I was keeping an eye on was Tony Cumberland, who's been committed to Oregon for, I think, the longest time of anybody in this 2026 class. And this class on 24/7's composite is number 2 in the country. It's second only to USC. And if Oregon flips Chris Henry, I think that would probably put him over the top to have the number 1 class by the 24/7 composite ranking. So great that 18 guys sign. I expect that Kendra Harrison and Devin Jackson will sign the day after, depending on when you're listening to or watching this show. So December 4th is when I expect them to sign. There's the one thing to keep an eye on, and then I'll talk about the 2 newcomers that I haven't mentioned on the show before. Jalen Lott, the wide receiver, big-time recruit, has been soaring up the rankings in the last few weeks. I do not believe that it is a coincidence that he has not signed and Chris Henry has also not signed. Because Gatlin Bear did sign with the Ducks officially, and that's, of course, been brewing since 2024. But I think there's a possibility that between Jalen Lott and Chris Henry, Oregon only winds up with 1. I do not think they will wind up with 0. I think it is far more likely they would wind up with 2. Based on what I've been told, I bet they wind up with 1. Which one? Let's follow the news and find out. And look, if I had to choose, I'm saying What's the opposite of being caught between a rock and a hard place? You being caught between a cushion and a soft place? That's where Oregon's at with these two guys. Like, oh, Chris Henry is going to stick with Ohio State? Okay, we'll take Jalen Lott. Oh, Chris Henry wants to come to Oregon? Jalen, best of luck, my man. Bet you're going to go somewhere and kill it. He probably will, because the dude is tremendously talented. But if you have a chance to get Chris Henry Jr., you do it. You absolutely do it. Both can be great wide receivers at the college level. You do not pass on Chris Henry Jr. So if it comes down to you can have one or the other, I'd go with Chris Henry. But Jalen Lott is not a consolation prize. But that's a name that Oregon is still waiting on. Again, I expect that Kendra Harrison, the tight end, and Devin Jackson, the defensive back, will sign on December 4th. So check whatever you follow along, usually on Twitter, to see all that news and see how that all plays itself out. But if those two guys sign, then we'll just be waiting on Jalen Lott, and I think that can be directly tied to Chris Henry. So overall, Oregon crushed it on National Signing Day because they didn't lose any of their big-time recruits, or any. And if they were to lose Jalen Lott, as I mentioned, it would probably mean they're getting Chris Henry. So there were a couple of new Ducks that signed on December 3rd that I have not talked about on the show before. The last Oregon new signee was Hudson Lewis, a 3-star wide receiver. He's got some kind of Charles Nelson vibes to him, 5'10", 175. He flipped from Utah. But couple of defensive backs that Oregon has added that are among the lower rated guys in the class, but guess what? They're just rankings. They don't mean nothing, but they also don't mean everything. So we'll start with Azel Banag, who's a 5'11 and a half, 170-pound athlete from Columbia, South Carolina. 3-star recruit in the 24/7 Sports Composite, number 769 overall player, number 64 corner. Chose the Ducks over Duke, Northwestern, Georgia Tech, and Wisconsin. And he's not a super big guy, and he looks like his size on film definitely projects as someone that would play the nickel spot, has that kind of Jaden Kennedy, Brandon Johnson type of film. But man, he looks like a smaller Aaron Flowers. He gets downhill and absolutely pops dudes. And in coverage, he's got plenty of highlights that make you feel like he could be, a Jaden Kennedy type there. And he plays downhill really well. He's got an incredibly quick trigger and great agility. He's got enough speed to where if he gets beaten coverage, he can make up ground, at least against the guys he's going up against. I'm not super familiar with the South Carolina high school football scene. I would think it's at least pretty good. I don't think it's, the equivalent of playing like in Idaho or in one of the Dakotas or somewhere where there just isn't a ton of talent. I also don't think it's a California, Florida, Texas, Louisiana, Georgia sort of state. But yeah, I mean, definitely has some explosion to his athleticism. But the reason I say smaller Aaron Flowers is, I remember watching Flowers film and thinking, man, dude gets downhill and really lays the lumber. And Flowers is bigger, and he's, of course, been a great player for the Ducks this season. But yeah, Azel Banag, I hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly. Interesting addition there for the Ducks in a secondary class that's already loaded. Not just in 2026, but in 2025 as well. Of course, Jet Washington's the headliner, the 5-star safety. He also signed with everybody else except for the 3 I mentioned. But the other guy, even more interesting, Trevon Watson, junior college transfer. And the last JUCO DB that Oregon brought in was Sione Laulea, who has seen the field in meaningful action in the last couple of years. Not a starter, but kind of a back end of the rotation guy, but we've seen how often they rotate defensive backs, so he could certainly have a role one day. Couldn't find any of his JUCO film out there. Sports information at the JUCO level is difficult. I know as someone who was the voice of a junior college when I first got out of college, but he's the number 115 overall JUCO player in this 2026 cycle, number 16 corner. Not a super big time prospect. Oregon had by far, I think, the most to offer from a pedigree standpoint. The other schools that were going after him were Boise State, Middle Tennessee, North Texas, and Texas State. So Maybe they see him as a special teams guy. Maybe they see him as a major depth piece that's, third or fourth on the depth chart at a given cornerback spot. He's 5'11", 185 pounds. And maybe he looks at it and goes, well, if I got a chance to go play at Oregon, I have to at least give that a try. He's played in 11 games this year, recorded 14 tackles, 2 picks. One of them he returned for a touchdown, 2 pass breakups, and he blocked a kick as well. Now, here's the interesting tidbit that I'm excited to end today's show with that many of you, I'm sure, will find interesting. On October 11th, earlier this season, he had one of his 2 pass breakups against Diablo Valley Junior College. Does anybody know who plays for Diablo Valley Junior College? The answer, of course, is Jerion Dickey. So I just did a little dive and thought, well, how's he doing? In that game, he had 2 catches for 9 yards. On the season, he's recorded 19 catches for 310 yards and 3 touchdowns. I have no idea the caliber of quarterback that's throwing him the football or what kind of offense he plays in. He hasn't recorded stats every single week. I don't know if he's been dinged up, but he had a 100-yard game earlier this year. He had 120 yards and a touchdown. So I hope he gets himself back on track football-wise because we know how talented of a player he is so far. Maybe he'll be back at Diablo next year. Maybe then he'll break out. Still will have plenty of eligibility left, especially when you consider that the NCAA is wishy-washy on actually counting JUCO years as actual eligibility anymore. So, and I fully understand. I mean, that's more the courts, actually, than NCAA. They're like, yeah, this is a different organization, so that doesn't count. But I found that interesting when I was just going through the game log of Trevon Watson's stats and saw Diablo Valley on there and thought, I bet some folks would be interested in a little check-in. So that's how he's doing. Overall, all right. Not terrible. Not great. Definitely wish him nothing but the best. But Azel Banag and Trevon Watson, those are not names I've mentioned before on the show because they hadn't been Ducks until National Signing Day, and now they are. Welcome to the flock. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.